Okay, let's run.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote. This is the weekly show where we introduce you to some of the best creators in the world, and we find out more about them by taking your questions. I am your host, Ryan of And I Quote channel, and our guest on this episode, and boy, what a treat this is for you. Doesn't matter if the anniversary is a day late and a dollar short, because Power Rangers lives forever. Please welcome visual effects artist and who's worked on many other projects aside from that great property. Rick Shick is in the building. Hello, Rick. How are you?
Hi, good. Good to be here. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
We're very grateful to have you here, Rick. Now, if you have any questions for this awesome-tacular gentleman as we go throughout the course of this show, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Do not forget to like and share this with everyone you know. And if you're joining us live or what is known as a replay, we thank you so much for being with us. So with that out of the way, Rick, what would you say were some of your favorite TV series growing up?
Oh, my gosh, growing up. So Saturday morning had to be Warner Brother cartoons. You know, up bright and early for that. Just loved it. Sitting down with a bowl of cereal, keep the gallon of milk next to you. So you finish the cereal and there's a little cereal left. So pour some milk in, finish that, a little bit of milk left, pour some cereal in, and just watching those old, what are they, 40s and 50s Warner Brother cartoons that they would play Saturday mornings in the 70s and 80s. Just loved it. I actually liked Leave It to Beaver, which was pretty funny. I mean, it was before my time, but totally watch it. I remember running home from the bus. I'd have to go from my neighbor's backyard through my own backyard into the house, running in to get there as fast as I could to watch Inspector Gadget and to dance around because the music was so good. Loved Inspector Gadget. In the 80s, I loved Miami Vice. I was a nerd, so I didn't have a lot of parties to go to on Friday nights. So I'd watch Miami Vice on Friday nights. But yeah, the old cartoons were great. Sundays was Abbott and Costello movies. So I think even back then, when I was a kid, it was all the old stuff. What would have been the old stuff for kids, but nothing was funnier than Abbott and Costello. Though it just cracked me up. And I liked it better than Three Stooges. I tend to appreciate Three Stooges more now. But yeah, it was definitely Abbott and Costello and Warner Brother cartoons were probably the best shows. I remember things like Automan, the guy who turns into a car, and Desi Arnaz Jr. would ride around inside of him. But he would drive the car, but he was the car. And he'd do 90-degree turns. And so the guy was always plastered against the passenger window when, the 90-degree turn would happen. But I always loved that kind of Manimal, Greatest American Hero, any kind of fantasy sci-fi stuff. I was totally into that when I was younger, for sure.
Good names there. I remember watching reruns of Inspector Gadget myself, and that theme song is very catchy.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? Was it a Chaim or was it a Shuki Levy song? It might have been. It's like Go Go Gadget, Go Go Power Rangers. There's a lot of go going.
Yep. A little bit of an influence there for sure.
Yeah,
there's definitely an influence there, 100%. But yeah, I remember watching reruns of that. There were the toys from Inspector Gadget. There were a few of them, I believe. So yeah, I remember those. Those were some fun stuff. Gee whiz. For sure. But good names there, man. Good names for sure. On the flip side of that, though, what would you say were some of your favorite movies growing up?
Oh, yeah. Definitely Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I saw that a bunch of times in the theater. The movie I probably saw the most in the theater, where my next door neighbor was my best friend. He and I would walk to the theater, which was sort of far away. And now I look at it I would never let my kid walking alongside a highway to get there. But it was $1, watched it all summer long. Clash of the Titans, that just just blew my mind. Medusa was just life-changing, watching something that looked so real. And I knew it was a puppet. I could figure that out, but I'm like, the light flickering on her from the flames and the interaction, she shoots an arrow and it hits his shield, and it's like it's in one shot. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was just amazing. And then later to learn that Ray Harryhausen, doing it by himself, like had to keep track of each of the snakes and doing the stop motion. It's not just like, where are these two things going? Like this arm's going forward and this arm's going back, but each snake is doing its own thing, and it's all so smooth and it was so effective. You know, it looks so cool. Now I rewatched it maybe 10 years ago, and some of the composites of the destruction of the city are just terrible. The compositing's horrible, but the stop motion just still stands up. It's just so fantastic. It's amazing. And then as I got a little older, like RoboCop 2, I even probably like that more just because of the bad guy Kane. That robot bad guy was so cool. That was absolutely fantastic. I do remember being a little kid. I liked the Apple Dumpling Gang. Loved Tom Knotts Tom Knotts. What am I saying? Don Knotts and Tim Conway. Absolutely fantastic. Oh, a fun thing is that the one time I went to the Emmys, Tim Conway got some special recognition. So he was there in the back of the theater being funny, of course. But that was neat to see him in person. Not up close or anything, but at least, you know, we're like in the same room. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I love the Apple Dumpling Gang. What else from back then? Like Pete's Dragon. That was cool. It's funny. In high school, there was a horror movie I remember. All of the it's funny because it's like the entire school went to go see it on a weekend. It was Mausoleum, which, yeah, exactly. Mausoleum was a really fun movie. I haven't seen it since I probably saw it in the theater, but I would recommend it to myself to watch again and see if it's still good. House, if you ever saw that, that's a horror movie from the 80s with Greatest American Hero. What is that? William Catt starred in it, and Moose from Night Court. He's in it as well. House is a great movie. Great visual effects, great special effects, great masks. I guess the Night of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead might have even been better, where just the zombies were just horrifying. They like skinny people in suits that are just oozing gooey stuff, and funny too. The movies were generally funny. Like Poltergeist, of course. Man, that was incredible. I would say one movie that really affected me in the theater, and it affected me so much the next day. I was telling all my friends about it, and they're like, Rick, we were there with you. I'm like, oh, really? Just, I didn't remember anything else but that movie. I'm like, oh, you got to see this movie. It's incredible. It was Dead Alive. It was one of Peter Jackson's earlier horror movies. Seeing that in the theater, Dead Alive, I loved it. The gore was so over the top and hilarious and, you know, scary at the same time. Yeah, I kind of like left my body during that movie, and then like came back the next day and like, hey everybody, you got to go see this. It's like, yeah, we all went to the theater together. What the heck's wrong with you?
Boy, that director's come a long way with those films, and then all of a sudden Lord of the Rings comes out and blows everyone's mind. So, you know. Yeah. I mean, I thought like he had a logical progression of goodness. Well, you know, Evil Dead 2, in that same vein of Sam
huge
Raimi.
Sam Raimi fan, especially that he's from Michigan and I'm from Michigan, and he's part of why I eventually decided to pursue film. It's like, well, he makes movies. He's from Michigan. Maybe I can make movies, or at the very least, I can help other people make movies. But yeah, Peter Jackson and Sam Raimi, I felt like following their careers, it all made sense. Like when Sam was announced as directing Spider-Man, I could not have been more thrilled. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great, because I thought Darkman was a better Batman than Batman from 1989. I am one of the few people, I guess, I was not impressed with Batman 1989. I liked the way it looked, but I thought Batman was terrible. When he comes floating in like a butterfly and he lands gently like a ballerina, and then he walks up to the bad guy and he gets shot. I'm like, why is he not tumbling? Why is he not, going into the shadows and sneaking up on the guys and they're shooting and he's, evading them? Like, to me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is the worst Batman I've ever seen. He's just like a baby person. So I wasn't a fan of that as much, but like Darkman, I thought hit the comic book hero action, the feel of a Batman movie, of what I thought a Batman movie should feel like, way better than Tim Burton did with what Batman was. Like, the world he built was beautiful. The gadgets were gorgeous. The car is amazing. The plane was amazing. My favorite part of that entire movie is Jack Nicholson pulling out the gun with a huge long barrel out of his pants. Like, to me, okay, that's one thing he nailed. That's awesome. But yeah, most of the movie, I'm just like, it's not really Batman. And I thought that Bruce Wayne was just like nerdy Tim Burton. Like, Bruce Wayne isn't a nerd who doesn't know how to talk to women. Bruce Wayne is the mask that, Batman puts on to throw people off the trail, and not just like, oh, what's happening? I don't know how to take a drink from a guy at my own party. It's like, oh, come on, man. I was the only one grumbling in the theater as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not going to cause a stir in the comments. Sure, not at all. No, listen, it's fine. And I've seen Darkman, so I'm allowed to say this because I've seen both films. So, I mean, Darkman, like, it had some moments here and there for sure, but at the same time, it was just kind of like, it's a little too weird, a little too wonky. Him running around like crazy with the pink elephant. I'm like,
oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Like, I mean, it's funny, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, it's weird, man. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But then again,
that's what I like. I like weird comic books. I like weird stuff like that.
That's old school Sam Raimi for you. And originally he wanted to do a Shadow movie, but he couldn't get the rights, so that's why he made Darkman instead. So But I like the Shadow movie eventually came out in '94 with Alec Baldwin, respectively, and I like that movie too. So no problem with that. But yeah, I'm in the camp that actually loves Batman '89, but that's fine. Yeah. Listen, to each their own. It's all good. Listen,
the two friends I went to see the movie with thought I was insane. They loved it. I'm like,
Right. No, it's understandable. Listen, to each their own, and all film is subjective, so it's completely understandable. By the way, Kate Hawkins, a good friend of ours, is here. He says, "Yo, Mojo, Jojo," and then he says, "Yeah, actually, Rick Shick is making some Shick points here." Good Lord. Nice one there, Kate. And by the way, Kate, it's good to see you again, brother. It's been a while. And then he also says, did Sega even approve that Shadow movie? I don't know if they did or not. I have no idea.
No idea.
No idea. So your question.
I wasn't a fan of that Shadow movie. I thought it was a good try, but it wasn't. Like, I liked what's the one with the ring that Bruce Campbell should have starred in, but it was Billy Zane.
Oh, that was The Phantom.
The Phantom. I like The Phantom better.
No, that's a good movie too. I like that movie too. That movie turns 30 in less than 2 years. So
Treat Williams was great in it.
He was a great villain.
Yeah. Oh, what was another one? He did there was a monster movie in the water on a boat that he was awesome in, and it had some really good like, this would have been early 90s integration of visual effects with practical stuff where a guy's face gets half eaten off.
Ugh. It wasn't Lake Placid, was it?
No. It was on a boat. It was like a heist, but then it turned into a horror movie.
Oh boy! With
a big sea creature, and at the very end, they get washed up on shore. And it also, like, it's funny. Any of those movies always seem like, oh, it should have starred Bruce Campbell. But Treat Williams was the main guy in it. He was great. But it ends with them getting washed up on an island, and they're like, oh, whew, that's over. And then you see the jungle and all the trees are shaking as something's coming toward them.
Oh, boy.
Gosh, I don't know what it was called, but man, it had some really good visual effects for the time.
Yeah.
It just blew us away of, like, people being half eaten. Not Anaconda. That also had some early CG stuff in it that was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was J-Lo and Ice Cube, and
yeah.
And who's the other one? Jon Voight. Jon Voight,
yeah. Oh man, he just chewed that movie up.
Boy, did he ever, with a fake mullet, or something to that effect. I don't know. And then Kate says, "Nah, get it, Shadow, like Shadow the Hedgehog. It's a joke. He's just kidding from earlier." All right, Kate, we're getting you, man. Oh, him and his video game jokes.
I don't even know what Shadow the Hedgehog is.
Yeah, it's Probably another unknown, well, maybe an unknown property for me anyway. I have no idea. But I digress. Once again, this is And I Quote with the guest of honor, Rick Shick. Don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. If you have any questions for him, let us know in those comments of the chat. And if you're joining us live or on a replay, we thank you so much for being with us. So there you go. So, Rick, did you get a chance to read any comic books growing up, or maybe some today? Did comic book ever enter your realm?
So when I was growing up, I did not go to the comic book store, but when we would go to my grandparents' house, I had older cousins who would buy comic books and then leave them at my grandparents' house, and then I would take them home. So I had a collection of really old stuff. I had some like early Star Wars comic books, a lot of Archies, which I wasn't a giant fan of, but that's what I had, so I read them. But yeah, a lot of really weird titles that I can't remember. They'd be like weird horror stories. Like I used to like, in addition to those kind of comic books like that, they weren't always superhero. Of course, there was some Superman, there was some Batman. There's like Batman and Robin riding some sort of weird two-legged creature on some other planet. Like those were the Batman comic books when I was a kid that I would see, or like, just Superman, I don't know, just doing like totally weird stuff. So they weren't super heroic the way that you think about superheroes now. But around that same time, I also loved, there were anthology books that I assumed, being a kid, I assumed they were all written by Alfred Hitchcock, but they would just have his, imprimatur on the cover of his collection of 5 short stories, presented by Alfred Hitchcock in book form. So I don't know if there'd be like a little paragraph introducing each story, and then a fantastic cover art of like just eerie, creepy drawings that like really drew me in. Like, oh, that's, what the heck is this? I got to read that. So that I liked reading the comic books that, that I would get from my cousins. And then those kind of comic books as well. I did have an extra affinity for Spider-Man. Loved Spider-Man. Thought that was the coolest. I loved the old Marvel cartoons. Like we knew all the songs, Namor of Atlantis is the Prince of the Deep, and like the Hulk song was like hunk, hunk, I think is what they were saying in the Incredible Hulk song, the Captain America song. I loved all of that stuff when I was growing up. But then I think I would say once I was able to drive in high school, I got a job delivering newspapers. So I started saving up some money, and then I could drive my older brother's car. I would go. That's when I started buying some of my own comic books, especially in the 90s when I moved to Los Angeles and actually had a job and then could just spend money on comic books and toys. So then I bought a bunch of comic books in the 90s. So I've got a bunch of different Spider-Man from then, and Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. I like the Creeper. I always thought he was a fantastic character. Plastic Man was hilarious. There's some like robot guy that I thought was pretty cool. I liked like Luke Cage was fun back then. Submariner. I never really got into Iron Man. He was okay. But yeah, everything pretty much revolved around Spider-Man and the whole Kingdom Come thing that came out. Oh my gosh, my friends and I just were insane for that. And in the early 90s, right before I got a job doing visual effects, when I had already moved to LA and I was trying to get whatever job I could in the industry, I was painting storefronts, just as a job. I was working at a Brookstone, and I would paint storefronts, in my off hours and on weekends. And I ended up painting a giant mural for a comic book store called Cool City Comics in Santa Monica. It is gone now. An architectural firm took it over. They kept most of the mural. I painted this huge, I don't know, like 20, 30 foot long mural on one wall that the wall curved into the ceiling. And so on that side is where I painted the mural. And it was the Jim Lee 4-fold X-Men cover. so it was just huge mural, and it was on like a popcorn kind of texture. So I had to like paint in and out at the same time, and like the wall was fighting me and trying to make it. So I did a really good job. It looked awesome when I was done. And then, yeah, so that's like Mark Hamill came into that comic book store when no one cared about Mark Hamill anymore. You know, like he'd just walk around, like no one would know who he was. Like, oh, hey, Mark Hamill's here. But that was a lot of fun. That was cool. That was neat doing that. And I mean, I have pictures of that somewhere. I might even have it on my website. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at my website again to see if that mural made it up there. But I did that mural for the comic book store, and they paid me in comic books and like food. And at that point, I was working for a company. I guess maybe that was pre-Brookstone. I was working for a company that made grocery stores. They would design the interior, and I can't remember what it was really called, but we called it Bunyan Brown Blister and Corn. But it was like Bunyan Brown Moon and More, something like that. But we just like the whole like foot disease theme for the name. It was run co-owned by some a couple that we had befriended, and so yeah, I was working for them, and they would have leftover paint. We were making the letters that would say ice. You know, we're like cutting them out and then sanding them and painting them, and they would have tons of leftover paint that they would just want to get rid of. They'd have to pay to get rid of this leftover paint. I'm like, can I just have it? So they're like, oh yeah, take it, because it would just be out of their way. So then I ended up with just massive amounts of paint that I got for free, and then I would use that paint to do these, you know, the murals and the painting around town of storefronts and stuff.
That is more phenomenal in more ways than one. Goodness gracious. And yes, I use that word in my everyday lexicon. I'm not ashamed to say it.
Awesome.
Because it's a great word. It just works. It really does. And Deja Marie is here all the way from Hawaii. She says aloha to both Ryan and Rick. Good to see you, Deja Marie. Aloha to you as well. Hope everything's well in your neck of the woods, Hawaii.
Yeah. Hey, Deja, what island are you on?
That's a great question. Let us know in the comments or the chat there, Deja Marie. We're curious about that. Because you're doing very well for yourself. You got a wonderful family out there in Hawaii. So we one of these days I hope to visit you and your loved ones in Hawaii. We'll have to make plans to make that happen at some point or another. She's a good friend of the show and a good friend of And I Quote channel. So it's always good to have her as well as Kate Hawkins is here too. Fantastic stuff. That is amazing stuff. So are you saying that you've had an opportunity to speak with Mark Hamill during those times, or
I mean, it would just have been in passing.
Oh, brief interactions. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
yeah, not like hanging out like, oh my gosh, you're Mark Hamill. And it was like,
right.
Like, oh hey, it's Mark Hamill.
No, I get that. That is fantastic stuff, man. Honestly, that is wonderful, wonderful story. I mean, gosh, and yeah, the love for Spider-Man. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, look what Sam Raimi did for it. I mean, just
yeah,
amazing stuff. Well, it's amazing. There you go. Well done, Sam Raimi. Well done. And what is it? A lot of people have Spider-Man 2 is one of like the top 5 greatest comic book movies of all time. So
yeah. That's a great movie, and I was so happy to have worked on it. And I actually, so when the day I was hired to work at Sony, the day I went on the tour, because when you get hired back then, when you got hired at Sony ImageWorks, which was part of the larger Sony property, so there was this Sony studio was the old MGM studio in Culver City, and then over to the side was ImageWorks. But it was like you could walk between the two. They had shuttles all day long going between them. And the day that I went in after I'd gotten hired, the day you go in to Sony for the first time in the 2000s or late, it might have been 1999, they would put you on a shuttle bus and give you a tour of Sony. And it was the same day that they had announced that Sony was going to be doing Spider-Man. And I was losing my mind. I was so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, not only is Sam Raimi doing Spider-Man, but it's Sony's project. And I had in the late 80s, I had written to Stan Lee when I was still in college. I'd written to Stan Lee, my idea for a Spider-Man movie, and it would have cameos from other superheroes. Like I had like scenes written out. I had like Spider-Man would be fighting someone on a rooftop, and then like Iron Man would fly up and he'd be like, no, I got it, Shellhead. And he'd be like, all right, you know, see you, Spidey. And he'd take off. So it would be an intro to a larger world, the way that it was in the comic books. I'm like, why is it not like the comic books where, you know, like I hated like the Punisher looked like if he just had a skull on his shirt, the Dolph Lundgren movie, if he had a skull on his shirt, it would have been 50% better right off the bat. You know, the Captain America movie with the rubber ears. It was the 50th anniversary of Captain America. So excited to go see this movie. It was terrible. The Red Skull was Italian, and he wasn't even a Red Skull for most of the movie. like how do you get these simple things wrong? So I was writing my own Spider-Man movie where in my movie, it would start with him fighting the Rhino, and his whole origin would be flashbacks. Like you would go between, like something in the fight would remind him of high school, and then you go into a flashback, you know, during the events of the movie. So that was my idea. And I was saying to Stan Lee, like back in the 40s and the 50s, as you well know, there were serials, there were, you know, shorter movies that would continue the following month or whatever the release date was, but they would have the cliffhangers and they would continue. I'm like, I don't know why there can't be Marvel theaters where you have running movies of these, you know, of each character having their own stories, and then the characters are also in each other's stories, just like they are, you know, just basically taking the comics to the theater. So, I mean, it's not like I'm the only person having the idea for a Marvel movie universe. You know, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I actually did write to Stan Lee about that idea. And I got a call. I'm in Michigan at my parents' house, and this is like the summer between two semesters of school, or maybe after my junior year, before my senior year. Maybe it's just after my senior year. But I get a call, and it's a woman from Stan Lee's office. And I'm like, well, my mom actually answers. I was like, Stan Lee's on the phone. I'm like, what? Give me the phone. And this is back when phones were attached to the walls. And I'm in my parents' kitchen. And so it's one of the longer cord ones. And so I'm just walking around like, oh my gosh. And the woman was, I don't remember if she was his secretary or what her actual job was, but she was calling on behalf of Stan Lee, saying that the Spider-Man movie is currently with James Cameron, and James Cameron usually doesn't team up with people when he's writing. And I'm just like, I can't even believe that I'm getting a call from Stan Lee's office. And my only thought is like, is he there? Put him on the horn. Put Stan on the horn. So when I did go out to LA, I did go to New Horizon, I think might have been, was that Stan's he had some company that, like, he was always making companies trying to do something when he basically got kicked out of Marvel, I think. So I did go to his studio with my portfolio of stuff, because I was in art school. I studied art history and fine arts as well. So I had my portfolio, which was a big case with drawings in it. I also had all my art on slides. So I had a carousel I could bring if anyone wanted to see a carousel, because sometimes, you know, that's how people looked at things back then. So I did get to go in. I never met him in that capacity, but I did show someone my art, and I guess they were just like, whatever. A lot of going out to LA and trying to get into, like, figuring out how do you direct stuff? How do you do, like, I didn't study any of this in school. I should have, but I didn't. It was as soon as, you know, like once you know, it's so what you've done is okay, but once you've done something, come back to us and let us know. Like going to the Kyoto Brothers. I don't know if you're familiar with them, visual effects guys. They actually made the Killer Clowns from Outer Space movie.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they do tons of practical effects.
Oh boy.
Really, really great fun stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, oh boy, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That movie gets mentioned a couple of times in my inner circle of friends.
Yeah. A friend of mine helped write the video game that just came out for them.
Wow.
So yeah, like Kyoto Brothers, Rhythm and Hues, some of the places that I was trying to get a job because of my art background. And it was universally, well, once you've done something, you know, come back and let us know. Like, well, how do I get to do something? How do I get started in this?
No, I get.
I'm
I
like
get
way
that.
off track from whatever the last question was.
No. It's fine. I was talking about how comic books entered your realm, and then we just went on a whole thing about comic books and how they influenced you and all that kind of jazz. So it's all good stuff. Don't get me wrong. And once again, we are here with Rick Shick, the man, the myth, the legend, the power of the VFX and the MMPR guy as well. Don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. If you have any questions, let us know in those comments or the chat. And if you're joining us live or what is known as a replay, thank you so much for doing so. And since we mentioned it a little bit earlier, let's dive into this because I'm very curious. How did you end up working on one of the most famous, and I do mean famous, properties in the world, simply known as Power Rangers, or in your case, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers? How did it start for you?
Yeah, so as I was saying, when I went to LA, it was hard to get a job doing something arty, trying to get some artsy fartsy going. And I had my portfolio of work, and I had sculptures, I had pictures of sculptures, I had drawings of things, drawings I had done, paintings I had done. And I'm shopping it around and trying to meet anyone I can. And at the time, I guess I had stopped working at the, I'm just like the timeline's coming together in my head a little bit. I'd gone from the grocery store making place to a Brookstone that was near where I lived in Santa Monica, just because I felt like it was less of a drive. The grocery store place was far away. And I was focusing on when I'm not at work, I'm showing my portfolio to anyone I can. I'm meeting as many people as I can. Even at the Brookstone, I was meeting producers. I met Eric Idle. That was super cool to talk to him for a moment at Brookstone. I would volunteer if someone had something large that they wanted carried out to their car. I would always volunteer because I don't know who I'm going to meet. I don't know who I'm going to be talking to. And I like talking to people. I'm like, you know, I would rather do that than just stand in the store waiting for someone to come in. So I think that was helpful. But I eventually met someone who knew a producer at Paramount, and they're like, oh yeah, I'll introduce you to them. So I got to go on the Paramount lot. I showed him my portfolio. I remember walking through the Paramount lot. That was pretty cool. And seeing giant scrims of like Star Trek city paintings that were just hanging like one after another, like that they would pull out for whatever they needed to do. That was sort of fun. And like the water tank where I think like the thing that was recent or like happened just after, maybe like the Congo hippo attack was in the water tank, which was a parking lot.
Oh yeah,
at Paramount. So like just seeing like that kind of history stuff is always super cool. But I went and met this producer, and he had nothing that he could offer me, but he said, I know this other place has this kids show that's taken off, and they're going to need someone for the second. They're looking for more people for the second season because it's just growing. I'm like, great. So for me, it was just another place to go interview. It was, you know, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go interview for Power Rangers. I had heard of Power Rangers because, you know, I wasn't the audience. I was already a young man in my early 20s. I was not watching the show. But like I said, I had heard of it, and I had a girlfriend for a little while who knew someone who just got a show and was having a party, and it ended up that was Walter Jones. I did not go to the party, but she was friends with Walter Jones, and so he had some party to celebrate getting a TV show. So I go in for the interview, and it's at night. It's a post-production facility. It's across from Warner Brothers. And if you've watched the Animaniacs, occasionally they talk about the smokehouse. So there's Warner Brothers is one side of the road, like all up above, and then there's the road. And then below it is like the place I'm at, Modern Video Film. And then across the street from it this way is the smokehouse. So it's like this little corner of Burbank, California. And I go in, and it's all dark and quiet. And it's a full post-production facility. So they do editing of TV shows. They do the sound design. They do the tape duplication. They do the QC of tapes, of recordings. So they're a full post-production facility, and they had a small visual effects department. And they had Haim Saban was friends with the owner. So Saban was a client of them. And I went in, and they're like, oh, he's coming from this other guy that we don't like. But I didn't even know the guy. Like, I just met the guy, but apparently they didn't like him. So they thought I was a buddy of his. And it's like, I don't know anything. I don't know anybody. So I go in and I meet the head of the effects department. I meet a couple of the artists. There were 2 artists on Power Rangers, Trent Shumway and Rick Cortez. Brian Longbotham was the visual effects supervisor. And then there was another guy named BC who worked in other capacities. He'd occasionally work on Power Rangers, but he was working on everything else for the company. And they were working at night, because during the day, the edit bays were where you'd have huge clients coming in. Richard Dreyfuss is coming in with whatever his movie is, you know, and they were doing Friends, because Friends was right across the street where they were shooting it. So they would do Friends. Like I've done a couple of effects on Friends. Just, you know, when it was needed, occasionally we'd do that. Home Improvement was huge at the time. So they were, Trent Shumway was doing the stop motion animation of Homie, the little house character that would do the interstitial.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that was a modern video film. I've worked on Home Improvement for a few shots. I never got to animate Homie, but I love stop motion, always did. So I interviewed with them, showed them my portfolio, had my giant portfolio of stuff, and they're just like, like the artists, like Trent and Rick are like, ooh, you know, this guy, I don't know about this guy, and the head of the department, Brian, he's like, well, let's you know, talk to him for a little bit. And he's like, well, let's put you on a shot and see how it goes. Let's see you do something. And I'm like, I've never done an actual visual effect. And they set me down to draw on Rita's castle when she is in the garbage can. Zed comes, puts her, like, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know what the story was. I just knew, okay, I'm looking at a fake castle. Here's a miniature of a castle. They wanted me to draw a mat for the balcony that was on the castle. And the idea is that the 2 putties are going to come with the garbage can and throw her off of the moon castle, you know, out into outer space, wherever she's going next. So I just know they like make a mat. Now a mat is a black and white drawing. Usually you start with all black. And like if I were going to cut out Mojo Jojo, I would draw a line. I'm trying to do this in reverse. I would draw a line around him and fill him with white and have everything else be black. And then I can cut him out and replace the background with whatever I want. So like the same way you're cut out over your background right now. The back, you know, so a mat is cutting you out. So I need to draw a mat of this balcony, and it's tiny. It's a little itty bitty balcony, and I'm like taking the whatever it is. If it's, I can't remember if it's Photoshop. Photoshop was sort of new. I had learned a little bit of Photoshop in college, but whatever I was drawing on, I'm like zooming in. I'm drawing, and I'm like, oh, I'm like sweating like crazy. I'm in this dark room that's not too big with a couple of workstations around it. And they leave, and I'm like, oh my God, I hope I do a good job. Oh my gosh, I hope I do a good job. And I'm just like, I get every pixel just right. And it just didn't even matter. It was hardly anything to do, but I just sweat like crazy over it. So the very first effect I ever did was draw the mat for that balcony for when the putties throw Rita out of the castle. So I don't know, maybe it took me 20 minutes to draw something that today would take 5 seconds. And I didn't do a composite or anything. All I did was draw a mat. And because of my sculpting background and my affinity for stop motion, they knew that they were going to do the putty pops where they get hit and then they break apart in stop motion. So they already had that plan there, and they were thinking, oh, this guy can do that stuff for us. So when they came back in, they saw my little drawing of the balcony. I guess they approved it. So that's how I got hired. And at the same time, I had interviewed at Sony because there was a Spawn game, video game that was coming out for PlayStation. I think PlayStation 1, maybe PlayStation was new then. I feel like they were building up a PlayStation department or something. And so I had interviewed about doing that. And so I told them, like, well, I had this other interview at Sony. So that's part of why they also hired me. It's like, well, let's just get this guy and keep him from going over to Sony. And like, we were dirt cheap because like, I just wanted to do something. And I was half coordinator's assistant. The coordinator was Mickey Royster. Amazing. She had an amazing mind of keeping track of everything. And everything would come in on these big tapes called digibeta tapes. Anything that was filmed was transferred to this huge tape. And there were time codes on the tape. And it seemed like she remembered the time code of every shot ever. It was just astonishing. But I would help organize as the shots are coming in, how they would be transferred to digitally into the system to be worked on. And so I was half doing that. I was half artist, but quickly I became more valuable as an artist. So then I just became full artist for the show.
That's awesome. So in a certain way, it's kind of like being right place, right time. And an opportunity presents itself. You walk right through the door. You don't wait for it to come to you. It just happens, and you just
you
boom,
gotta
you
go and look. Yeah, you gotta get yourself out there. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely. Because I like I said, I didn't know anything about it, and it was maybe my 30th interview of going somewhere trying to get a job.
Wow.
You know.
Wow, that's
so yeah. You don't give up.
No, absolutely. That is absolutely stellar for sure. And once again, we are here with the guest of honor, Rick Shick. Don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. If you have any questions for him, let us know in those comments. And if you're joining us live or on a replay, we thank you so much for being with us. So we kind of hinted at it here and there, maybe here and there, but to be more specific, what would you say are some of the best rewards about being a visual effects artist?
The reason I'm still doing it over 30 years later is the variety. I like, it's fun. It's interesting. Like I did temp jobs when I was in LA, you know, and I hated that, but you're like stuffing envelopes, you're folding paper, you're moving things around. I worked on the first Fantastic Four movie. I was a casting assistant when I first came out to LA, unpaid internship, which just meant working for free. I made copies of scripts. That was like the main thing I did, was making copies of scripts. And on audition days, working for as a casting assistant, I would read opposite the actors when they were auditioning. So that, you know, that was kind of fun. But like all that paperwork, moving papers coming in here and then going out there, I just glaze over. And on my worst day as a visual effects artist, now I've been a creative director, for video games and making, you know, telling the story and figuring out camera moves and what's happening. And now I'm back to being a visual effects artist. I'd always say on my worst day, I'm drawing something. So if I'm drawing that balcony, what am I going to complain about? I'm drawing something. And I love making something that wasn't there before, you know, like on, you know, papers, you're just filling them out or whatever. But the fact that we're making something new, something that did, you know, there was nothing here and now there is something, you know, like you need this bird, like, and you never know what the problem is going to be. We need someone spitting blood out all over. How are we going to do that? We need a dead bird here where we didn't have the prop. How are we going to make that happen? You know, how are we going to put in these oil rigs that we need, you know, or, you know, make up this, what's this energy portal going to look like? I love it. I love the variety of what's going on. Now it can get tedious, but I tend to, in the tedious moments of like working frame by frame to accomplish something, the day just flies by. Like if it's an 8-hour day, I'm just like looking, oh, you know, I'm done. I'm done working already. Time's up. But yeah, I think the constant variety and the making up something new, it keeps visual effects. It's always fresh. You know,
always fresh. Opposite side of the coin, though. What are some of the biggest challenges about being a visual effects artist?
So a lot of it is, I would say lately, the last 2 decades has been a lack of planning in accomplishing something. Because we can do anything. There was a time, I'd say in the 2000s, as a Flame artist, Flame was the specific software hardware at one point that I was on. in the 2000s. And we were the guys who could do anything. We could fix anything. And the more that you can fix anything, the more the director can change their mind later in the stage of shooting. So when you're making Jurassic Park and you're planning everything out and they did stop motion scenes ahead of time to figure out where things were going to be. And then they're probably not changing it a whole lot by the time they shoot it because there's a plan. In say Men in Black 3, when you plan for Will Smith to be running on this gantry next to a rocket and you've built the gantry here, but then suddenly the director's like, let's take the camera and put it down here. And then you're looking up at the studio lights behind Will Smith's head. So you got his head going by a bright, shiny light. And now his head's disappearing. And then you cut that out and it's like, well, there's a brick. So now I have to remake his head. So the freedom to do anything, to figure out anything, to make something eventually look real, that's what's caused a lot of horrible planning to happen, or even just a lack of planning where, like, well, we shot this, but now that gives me an idea that, can we just move the camera this way a little bit? Well, yeah, we can roto everything out, cut it all apart, put it on cards, make a 3D scene, replicate the camera move, and then we can put the camera somewhere else a little bit. It just costs a ton of money and effort and energy. And then you end up spending 90% of your effort is to make something work and 10% is to make it beautiful. When it's really nice when it's the other way around, where if everything's planned out really well, like when I get awesome CG elements, or even like Zathura, where they shot a guy, like part of the robot suit was really on set. It was a guy in a robot suit with the body and the feet, and then black leggings and no arms, and he'd run through. So you'd have real weight and real interaction with the set and real reference of what things look like in the scene. So when the other departments would make the CG animated arms, they had a thing in the shot to match to. You had a reference to match. So when it all comes together like that, that's just beautiful. That's a joy. Like all the pieces are working well. Everything comes together so fun. It's so nice. Well, another fun thing. Well, you're asking about the not fun things. I can say that there is a difference between supervising and being an artist. As a supervisor, it's cool because you're involved at a higher level and helping decide what things are going to look like. Like in Only Murders in the Building, there's a giant elevator shaft. It doesn't exist at all. So we're creating this elevator shaft. We're figuring out what it's going to look like, and picking out the pieces and looking at different elevators and presenting them to the showrunner of like, here's what we think the elevator shaft should look like. And not just being an artist who's getting the elevator shaft, but the one who's helping design it and figure out what things look like. Like that's that's totally fun. When you get to help tell the story more so as a supervisor. But also it's more stress because now you have a bunch of artists that you're supervising, and there's the whole herding kittens thing. Artists have their own ideas. They want to make stuff. They want to make things cool. They want to make what they think is cool. So you got to try to get them on board with what your vision is, so that what they think is cool is what you think is cool, and try to get everyone going the same direction. And a lot of being an artist, what I try to do as a supervisor is I want to take away all of the considerations that have nothing to do with making it look pretty. So any of the organizational stuff, or like, what scene am I working on, or how does this relate? I want to give the artists all the information that they need so they can focus on making something look really cool. Like that's my goal is as a supervisor. As an artist, I'm like, I will do whatever, like, especially as a freelancer back in the 2000s when I was making just way too much money. It was beautiful. As a freelancer, it's like, I'll sweep your floors. You're paying my rate. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. You tell me to make this thing green, 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 green. And then at the end of the week, you're like, make it blue. Some people are like, oh, why make it blue? You said green. I'm like, what do I care? I'm like, I'm getting paid. And I'm just, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Now you want it, we've spent a week making it one way, and then you want to go the other direction. Fine. So as an artist, there's far less stress. If you're not paying me for my opinion, I'm not going to give it. I'll still have an opinion, but I'm not going to give it. But if you're paying for my opinion and you want my opinion, you're getting it. I'll give you my opinion. I have no problem doing that. So I can separate those two things. And with the industry going up and down and up and down and down lately, I was a creative director in my previous job. Now I'm a visual effects artist, compositor again, on a film. It's just so much more smooth sailing. Like, here are your shots, and I do my shots. And my philosophy as a freelancer, because I was freelance for many years, then I went staff for a while. My philosophy as a freelancer, that's served me very well. Because I know some people who they're not good at freelancing because they're always worried about the next thing. They can't stop worrying about, oh, am I going to get work? Am I going to get work? Am I going to, and they like wear a hole in their shirt because they're always fidgeting. So I was always like, I will do my best. You hire me, I do my best. If my best isn't good enough for you, you fire me. And I know I've done everything that I can do, so I'm okay with it. So that's kind of kept me on an even keel over all these years as well, and not getting too stressed out about stuff. I mean, especially going from Power Rangers, when I worked on Power Rangers, I was working for Modern Video Film. I wasn't working for, Saban was our client, right? So I was working for Modern Video Film. We would have other shows, other stuff to do, did a bunch of other things. And when it got to the point where I felt like I'm not learning anymore, I'm like, okay, I started doing freelance already. I'm working here during the day. I'm working freelance at night. I'm making way more money as a freelancer. I'm just going to go full-time freelance because I'm not learning anymore. Like this department is no longer growing the way I would like it to grow. Promises have been made and not kept. And if I have nothing more to learn, I got to move on. So I just went full on freelance, and I was freelance for like 19 years before I went staff again somewhere.
Wow, that's an awfully long time. No jobs, freelance. Best thing in the world for a kid your age. You give me more pictures of newspaper selling clown, maybe I'll take them off your hands. But I never said you had a job. Meat. Say nice box of Christmas meat. Best I can do. Get out of here. Sorry, that's J. Jonah Jameson.
Exactly what that is.
And that's from the first one too. So
and the funny thing is, I'm sitting there listening to him like, he's right.
J. Jonah Jameson.
For us, I mean, as visual effects artists in the 2000s and the 90s, freelance was killer because I'm not good at having a company and making a company run. I like someone else do that.
Right.
And bring me your problems, and I will, do my best to fix them and make them look awesome, and have stuff like. I love it when people don't even know that we've done effects on a show. Like, oh, there's effects on that show. That's super cool. Because it means that we've done our job really well when you don't know that we've done something. Yeah.
Surprises happen every day. So outside of Power Rangers, you've worked on so many things. But one thing I would like to ask you about, if you don't mind, in the 2000s, little reboot came out back in the day, trying to get the Man of Steel back on the big screen after so many years of being away, unfortunately. Superman Returns came out in 2006, and it's you worked on the movie, and I believe you also had a hand in the movie video game or something like that. What was it like working on Superman Returns?
Yeah, so that was a really fun time, in my career where I was spending about half of the year compositing on big films, and the other half of the year I was directing video game cinematics for Electronic Arts. So for E3, the E3 convention was huge back then. EA was the biggest presence at E3, and each year they had to top themselves. So one of a supervisor from Power Rangers had gone on to work for Arnson Communications, which produced videos, and he hired me to help direct when E3 was getting so big and EA had so many projects and they needed more creative directors to fashion these commercials and that would play at E3, and then sometimes they'd be, in ads for the game, or they would be included with the game as a cutscene, or just like an extra thing. So I started doing that for half of the year. I would direct these cinematics, which was totally cool, figuring out what the story is, telling the story, as well as, guiding a team of artists and being an artist myself. I could make my own animatics where I'm telling the story visually I'm working with, an awesome storyboard artist named Jeff West. I hire him to do the storyboards. I give him thumbnails. He does beautiful storyboards. I cut apart his storyboards and animate them and then give that to the CG team of here's the template that I want you to follow. So that was so much fun. And the year that I did Superman Returns, the video game, that one I actually started by I was hired by Arnson Communications. They gave me the Superman property to work on because they have like a few creative directors and they're like, you're going to be doing Sims, you're doing Superman and Def Jam Vendetta, whatever it's going to be. And so I went to Florida with the team to see where they're developing the game and the model, a giant model they had of Metropolis and some of their early demos. And they wanted to highlight Metallo being this giant tornado-y thing. And so we get what we would call the X. We're going to get the X from the client of what they want to do. So then I have a producer who's also a writer. So he and I come up with a story, come up with a flight plan for Superman going through the city, deciding how, we're not recreating their Metropolis from the video game because they don't have it fully worked out yet. Like, it also depends what stage the game is at when we're doing these cinematics. So I make a storyboard of Superman fighting Metallo and how the fight's going to work, how Superman's going to react, where he's going to go, what I think is, putting the camera where I think it's going to be good. And it's really fun. It's like coming up with a flight path through, like I actually have a drawing somewhere of a top view and a side view of where Superman's going to fly, because I want the artist to follow my vision. So the more of my vision I give them, the more they can hit it. And whether we're going to use that entire, like I'm thinking we're going to use this whole thing, but whether we do or not, it's better to have a plan than not have a plan, I think. And if someone has an idea that's better than the plan, awesome. And I get to take credit for it because I'm the director. Hooray. So, I always think that works out great. So then we work with a vendor. So there would be a CG team that is, then we're getting models from EA and then taking them to the CG team in Venice, California. And usually we're completely reworking the models. They don't work in the videos the way they work in the game. We're looking at the motion capture they have and we're reworking it, or we're animating ourselves. So for Superman Returns, I directed the cinematic, which I recently found, I'd say in the last 2 years, someone had it and put it up on YouTube, and I commented on it. I'm like, hey, I directed this. This is so cool. Hooray. This is what, so then I started having some conversations with some people, which is really nice. But we put that whole video together, and and I'm working with an editor who, we're getting, and we have our, like, I wanted Bizarro to be in it and they wanted Bizarro to be in it. So at the end, Bizarro's going to break through and just be like, me, I'm here too, or whatever. But then they decide, we want to hide that. So they cut that part out. But I'm working with the editor. I'm working with the sound design team, the music guys, Egg Chair Music, fantastic guys. But at the same time, they're like trying to get Superman music. We want the John Williams music because, suddenly it's 75% better when there's Superman music in your piece. So they eventually paid for that. I think it became the most expensive cinematic that EA had made to date. And my guess is that it's because they actually paid for the John Williams music. That's what put it over the edge. But it was really cool. And like working with Superman, like I love Superman, like working with Superman and Metallo and just figuring out how he's going to fight him and what the scenes are. And in it, there's a scene where Superman, like Metallo shoots a missile out of his hand at a building, and Superman flies under the missile and starts pushing it up. And then it just scrapes the top of the building as it goes by. And that's been in like a million movies now. And I feel like, hey, I did that first. And someone who saw it is now a director and like kind of did their version of that sort of thing. And I don't know, maybe I stole it from someone else as well. Who knows? But I like to think that, hey, I made that up, and now other people have like done that and tons of stuff. So that was a really, really fun project to work on. And I actually end up doing, because I'm a visual effects artist as well, I end up doing the final polish once the video's together. If there's something I don't quite like, or if I want to like, I don't know, if I want to highlight Superman a little bit more, I want to put more of a streak on him, I can go in and do that myself using compositing software. And so I end up being the final polish. So I kind of save some money because they don't have to hire somebody else. And I'm not really good as a client behind someone doing what I do, because a lot of times you'd have a flame artist in a room, and at the back of the room, they have a big sofa for the executives or whoever to hang out and say, hey, do this, or hey, do that. And so when I'm sitting in the back and an artist is doing it, and I'm saying, hey, do this, I'm also thinking, I know how I would do that. So I have to keep myself from saying, and do it like this, because this is what I would do. And then hit that button, then hit that button, then hit that, like you got, because there are different ways of accomplishing the same thing. And your whole compositing philosophy could be entirely different. So I do my best to just kind of sit back and like, okay, they're going to do what they're going to do. But like, I like to just do it myself. I'm like, I'll just get it done. Like there was a time on that project where someone couldn't quite, I guess either I wasn't communicating well what I wanted, or she wasn't able to do it. And she's like, well, I gotta go. Like, I can't stay late tonight. And I'm like, I can stay late. I'll just take over. And that way I'm not translating to somebody else. So that video was really fun to do. And the reviews on it were really cool. People loved it. I think people liked it better than the game. But some of the YouTube comments back in the day were very flattering. And then I get a call from Sony, and they're like, hey, we want you, are you available? Can you come work on Superman Returns? I'm thinking, that's so awesome. Because I would basically go between Sony and directing. And so I turned them down to direct this piece. But then I guess the movie was still going on long enough that they're like, hey, we still have like one really big shot that we need someone to work on. Can you do it? I'm like, yeah, I just finished working on Superman Returns, a video game. So then I go into Sony, and I'm in the flame department with all of my usual buddies. And I worked on one shot. I thought it was the second to last shot in the movie, but I watched it recently, and it's like the fourth to last shot in the movie. So at the end of the movie, when, I don't know, Superman's like, yay, I love my son who is not with me or whatever, or he's accepted it, and he goes flying off, and he's flying over Metropolis. I did that shot of him flying over Metropolis. And that's the only shot I did in the movie. And it's an interesting shot. And I think this is somewhere in my video stuff on YouTube, is a breakdown of that shot. But it was a helicopter shot flying into New York, going over the Washington Bridge, through Manhattan. And we basically reversed that, sped it up like 1,500 times because, and I've actually seen this in other movies, whenever there's like a slow flying in shot, it is really fast, because if you go slow, you barely cover any distance if you go real speed. So it's super sped up, and then it's reversed. So there's all this traffic driving around Manhattan. And the first thing I have to do is clean out all that traffic. And when we say in visual effects, a lot of times we'll say, well, we removed this from the film. You never really remove anything. You cover it up with something else. Like all you can do is add. Like I can't take this video and then remove my red glasses over here. I'd have to, where am I pointing? There. I'd have to paint a section, probably based on this section, paint a piece of wood that looks like that and put it over the top of it. So whenever people like the terminology is not quite right, but it's what people understand. So I have to cover up all of this traffic. And there's a bridge with a million lines, support lines coming off of a cable to hold it up. And the lights are wrapping around it. So there's all the interactivity of the traffic. So I have to paint new sections of road and track them into the scene, and new sections of bridge, new sections of water. the lights in the back, like there's airplanes that are coming in, zing, 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 coming in on the landing path. So I look at what's the actual real-time speed of it, cut that section out, put that in, put a new piece of sky in. So I'm tracking in, to this piece that's sped up 1,500 times. I'm now tracking in an original flight path that's much slower. I'm slowing down the blinking of the lights on buildings. So I'm retiming that. I'm remaking that. And I also added myself into a spotlight on the Washington Bridge where I did a drawing of me pointing up at Superman, shrank it down, and put it in. So I'm the second to last person in the movie. It's just me and Superman. I'm the only person in Metropolis who sees him like, hey. But like no one would ever notice, but I know it's there. So
oh boy. By the power of Grayskull, Rick Shick has the power. It more so than ever. But yeah, that is just so. How was your first day on the job? I would say it was swell, Lois. Swell? What is that? No one uses that word anymore, Clark. Sorry, that's a line from the old school Christopher Reeve days, but I apologize. I know that's not relevant to Superman Returns necessarily, but hey, good stuff. The good stuff.
Brandon Ruth did a fantastic Christopher.
He was great.
Reeve. He did a great Christopher Reeves. He was great. He had the look. I mean, honestly, when I saw the trailer, and for those of you who remember this from 2005, 2006 on, the marketing was extraordinarily done well for Superman Returns because the teaser trailer literally has the John Williams score in that 1.5-minute teaser. If you know what I'm talking about, you can find it on YouTube right now. I'm thinking to myself, okay, John Williams is involved in this. Something's going on. This must be because we weren't really sure what this was at the time. And then we come later to find out it's a continuation of the Christopher Reeve movies. And I'm thinking, this kid, whoever he is, what's his name? Brandon? He looks very much like Christopher Reeve. Like he literally looks like his doppelganger or like his twin brother, or maybe if Christopher Reeve reincarnated, he would look like Brandon Routh. Like literally, like he was like a spitting image of Chris Reeve. And that's not a knock against Brandon Routh. It's what the studios were looking for at the time and what they had and what they wanted. And he delivered it in spades. And I've met Brandon Routh at conventions. He's a nice guy. He loves meeting the fans. He appreciates everything that people around him have done. And Brandon, my hat's off to you, man, because Superman Returns, it must not have been an easy thing to make or put together at all, but you did it well, man. You did it well. He did what they asked him to do. That's for sure.
Yeah, give credit where credit is due. But man, is that just a super story we just heard from Rick Shick, the guest of honor on Anti-Quote. Do not forget to like and share this with everyone you know. If you have any questions, let us know in those comments. And if you're joining us live on a replay, we thank you so much for being with us. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to experience this yet or not in your life here, Rick, but have you had a chance to table or go to Comic-Cons? And if so, have there been any special memories for you from meeting the fans of some of your works, or maybe even meeting some of the biggest names in Hollywood that you've been to as an attendee?
I went to, in like 1995 or 96, went to the San Diego Comic-Con. A bunch of my friends are like my friends that I worked with, amazing artists. Back in the day working at Modern Video Film. And they would always go to the comic book things. And I'd be like, nah, it's okay. I don't know. I guess I'm not as outgoing as they are as far as that stuff goes. But I did go to San Diego Comic-Con. We met Stan Lee. Back then, no one really cared about him, so you could just go hang out with him. He saw whatever the ex-wives. This was his project at the time. 1995. So he signed this, and we chatted with him for a little bit. So meeting him was really cool. Doing that. There was the LA Comic-Con. I guess it was a Comic-Con. There was some sort of convention that I think was once a month in LA. And so I went to that with my buddies once, and that's when I first met Sam Raimi. He was there to promote The Quick and the Dead. So like I just lost I'm like, oh, Sam Raimi's going to be here. And we're like the only people who even know who he is really, because, he wasn't huge at that time, but just being Michigan nerds, we're like all for it. So I talked to him there. I actually stabbed him with a little fake knife. They were giving out Lord of Illusion knives, retractable blades, little plastic things. And so everyone's stabbing everyone. And we noticed, and I bought a picture of, it's up here. I bought a picture of Sam and Siegel, I think, he was the writer of Evil Dead 2. So I bought this picture from someone at the con to have Sam Raimi sign that for me. And and we saw him beforehand. So we chatted with him a little bit because no one was around him, because no one knows what Sam Raimi looks like except for the right kind of nerd. So we chatted with him for a little bit, then asked a couple of questions during the panel. And then when it was over, I'm like, I want to stab Sam Raimi. It's like, I just want to add, do you mind? Can I just stab you? Because, the whole Evil Dead thing, like, it makes sense. So after the panel, when he's done talking, now everyone knows who Sam Raimi is because he just gave a big presentation. So now he's being crowded on his way out. And I'm just like, oh man. And so he's like coming up. I'm like, do you mind if I, as he walks by, and he just completely ignores me. I'm like, this is my only chance probably to stab Sam Raimi. So I come up behind him and I stab him in the back with this retractable Lord of Illusion prop that they're giving away. And he's like, huh? And he turns around, and we ended up chatting for a little bit. He's like, well, what do you do? And like, oh, I'm working on Power Rangers. Oh, you guys do great lightning. My kids love your show. And I'm like, I love your shows. You like my work, and I like your work. I can't believe Sam Raimi. It was crazy. I was so excited. I mean, so nice. He's so gracious. And so I chat with him for a little bit. And then, he goes off to his thing. It's like, I talked to Sam Raimi. I stabbed Sam Raimi. This is the greatest day of my life. I can't believe this. So it was years later when I was at Sony and I didn't work on Spider-Man 1. I gave them a video of me swinging on the rings in Santa Monica for like reference. And they're like, keep this guy away from us. But by Spider-Man 2, I had worked enough at Sony that they hired me to work on it. And then, so I'm at the studio one day, like that you'd go to the studio just because it was cool to go. There were places to eat. There's a Sony store. So I'm walking on the sidewalk, and this is before Spider-Man 3, and Sam Raimi's coming the other way. And I'm just like, as soon as I see him, I just can't help but smile. And I think he kind of like looks up and sees like, oh no, here comes somebody. He looks down again, and I'm just like, coming right at you, like, I'm gonna go say hi to Sam Raimi. And he looks up and he sees, oh, he's still coming over here. So I see he like resigns himself to, I'm gonna have to talk to this guy. And we shake hands. I'm like, Mr. Raimi, love your stuff. And I was like, I stabbed you a few years ago at a con. He's like, oh, I remember being stabbed by you. That was like, he's just so nice. Like, I doubt he remembered anything, but he pretended to remember. And so we chatted for a bit. And then at the end of chatting, he's like, well, maybe we can drag you back kicking and screaming to work on Spider-Man 3. I'm like, you bet, Mr. Raimi. Talk to you later. And then he goes on his way. And then I pretend to keep going the way I'm going. And then I run around because he's going the direction that I now need to go in, which is back to ImageWorks. I get back to ImageWorks as fast as I can. I'm like, I go to my boss's office. I'm like, I get the door, open the door. I'm like, Don, I just talked to Sam Raimi, and he said he wants me to work on Spider-Man 3. So you got to make sure that I work on Spider-Man 3. I was so thrilled. So every interaction I've ever had with him has just been gold. But going to more like the Comic-Con thing. So like, that's my, meeting people, started at Comic-Con, went to the studio. But the last few years, I've started going to Ranger Stop and Pop in Atlanta.
Oh, yes.
Ranger Stop and Pop in Orlando. I just got, like, 2 weeks before Morphicon, I got a letter from I can't remember the guy's name.
Scott Zillner, maybe?
Scott Zillner. Saying, hey, we'd love to have you come to Power Morphicon. And I'm like, awesome. Are you paying for my flight and a hotel? It's like, oh no, oh no, we can't do that. I'm like, oh yeah, no worries. He's like, oh, I thought you were in LA. And I'm like, yeah, if I were in LA, I'd be more than happy to come by, but I can't drop everything at the last second and do it because I'm not living there. So Ranger Stop and Pop, it blows my mind that there are this many people who are still in love with this. It's incredible. It's so fun. It's fun to tell the old stories. I started out just by going to a comic book store, and I'm like, hey, like my local comic store, I'm like, I have these props from the show. These are the original Zords that were in the transformation sequence. And when the Zords changed from Dinozords into Thunder Zords, Like, what are these worth? Are these worth anything? And like, well, let me get my Power Ranger guy and see. And so because of that, they're like, well, we're having Power Rangers come by. You should come by on this weekend and sit with them. I'm like, what will I do? They're like, we don't know. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know either. So, so I have a little book of photos from behind the scenes back in the day, that a little booklet that I put together. And I have my props. I have more props than just these two. And so I just set out at a table with my props, and I'm like, here are the Rangers. They are beautiful human beings. They are actors. And, I'm just a behind the scenes nerd. So while the people were waiting in line to talk to them, they're like, well, what is that toy? That's just a toy. And I'm like, well, this was in the show. And they're like, wait a minute, what do you mean in the show? Well, in the second season, when the dinosaurs changed into Thunderzords, these were toys that we turned into puppets to do that transformation sequence, because it never happened in the Japanese footage. That's totally an American invention, that dinosaurs change into Thunderzords. And I was on set when we shot this, and you were what? So that's pretty much how my whole interaction with the convention thing started. And now I've been to, I think, is it three Rangers Stop and Pops. And like I said, it's really fun. I actually had a Ranger yell at me for not charging for my autograph, because they're like, hey, you don't bring down the values of our autographs. You got to charge for your autograph. I'm like, I feel weird. So now I'm used to asking people to pay me money for, like, instead of writing a check, like usually if I'm signing something, I'm giving someone money. I'm writing a check for my utilities or something. So to actually write my name down and then have someone give me money, that's just blows my mind. But yeah, so I've started going to Ranger stops. I've done some panels, tell the stories. I was on a panel with the Ranger kids, when they were turned into little kids, because I actually did the effect when the Rangers were youngified.
No kidding.
So I designed that, put it together. Back in the day, they would just shoot the Rangers and then shoot the kids, and they're just like, make them younger. That's all the instruction we would get from the studio, from Saban. So then usually it's just up to us. Well, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, I think I can, I can roto this, and I can have this blobby, and I can draw some energy. And so a lot of times, whatever shots we were assigned as artists, we were also making up what that was going to look like. Sometimes the visual effects supervisor would have a say, but frequently they're so busy they didn't care. And they're like, yeah, just do the magic you guys do. So I was on a panel with the kids. That was really fun. I mean, they're not kids anymore. And I just feel like I'm just like so old compared to everyone else. But through that, I started getting invited to more of the Ranger Stop and Pop. The last Ranger Stop and Pop in Atlanta, for my panel, instead of just me talking, we actually shot a scene of a putty pop, because I used to do the stop motion of the putties breaking apart. We shot a scene where I gave someone else my red Hawaiian shirt, and they stood up on stage and they pretended to be me talking about it. And it's like the way Power Rangers would start in a classroom or at a presentation, and then a putty comes in and attacks. So the conceit of the show is Rick Shick is giving a presentation, and it's not me because I'm directing the scene, but giving a presentation on putties, and then a putty comes into the audience, and then a Ranger or a putty is in the audience and like jumps up and like menaces, and then a Ranger comes running in and hits the putty in the chest, and then the putty breaks apart. So I shot it all with the attendees who were there, and they're all reacting, and I'm telling them what to do. And then over the next 2 weeks or so, I did stop motion on a putty, and I comped in, when the Ranger hits the putty, that the putty breaks apart just like it does in the show. And then I'm working with some other guys on this YouTube show, and so then they put in the sound effects and for me, and made like a credit list at the end. And so we did a putty pop 30 years later. So that was tons of fun. And the people that I don't get a lot of people at my panel. It'd be fun if there were more people, but the people who come they're so excited. It's so much fun.
So in other words, we ask you questions, you tell us a story. Affirmative. With that being said, this has been a more phenomenal, and if I do say so myself, in more ways than one, I gotta say this. This has been a more phenomenal episode in so many different ways. Thank you to Rick Shick for being our guest on this episode. Rick, thank you so much for telling us these stories.
Yeah.
And telling us a little bit more about some of the behind the scenes things that go into making these movies work, or these video games, or these TV series work. Because as we all know, teamwork makes the dream work, ladies and gentlemen. It is not just one person waving a magic wand making these things happen. There are hundreds and hundreds of people that work tireless hours behind the scenes making these shows look as good as they do, including MMPR and all the seasons that came after it, respectively. Hence the reason it's been 30 years strong, at least here in North America, even though it's being adapted from Super Sentai, respectively. But great stuff. So, Rick, if somebody wants to know more about you or learn some of these behind-the-scenes stories or how certain things may have worked on television series, maybe even some movies or even video games from back then, where can they follow you on social media, Rick?
Yeah, so on YouTube, we have a show called Behind the Power VFX with Rick Shick, and there are 5 episodes out right now. I actually have a lot of my behind-the-scenes footage in the day from maybe 95 on of visual effects. So I'm just breaking down a lot of what I've done and how the different pieces come together, how the decisions were made. And sometimes we have special guests who have come on. And so I've interviewed a couple of Rangers, and we discuss, the difference between what I did my day and how things were done in their season. So yeah, that's Behind the Power VFX on YouTube, also on Instagram, and that is Shick Rick. And there's that's just I guess that's just me. There's also Behind the Power VFX on Instagram, and then on TikTok I've done. We have a TikTok as well, and that is Behind the Power VFX. And I sometimes will do like if I'm sculpting, because I'll make new putties today, and that's one of the things I sell at Comic-Cons. Our putties made the exact same way I used to make them, with the same materials. I even have the same tools that I had 30 years ago. I'm the same tool making it, so it's very authentic. And sometimes I'll do like a live streaming thing where I'm sculpting something. And so if you're interested in that sort of stuff, that will be on TikTok.
Thank you very much, kind sir, for being here. Congratulations on everything you have done. And thank you for being here once again to share some of these wonderful, wonderful stories. And we look forward to having you on here again somewhere here in the future, whether it's talking about MMPR, some of the other things you've worked on, because you've got your resume is like 60 miles long. It's ridiculous. But look forward to having you here again. I'm going to talk to you here in just a moment. My name is Ryan of And I Quote Channel. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. Follow us across all forms of social media simply at And I Quote Channel. Links to where you can follow Rick, Shick, and myself are located in the description, so make sure you check out those links there. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers. Once we do, we'll go through a great big live stream celebration that will include returning guests. Maybe Rick Shick will be back, maybe showing us some of his amazing works of art, I would say. And we're going to have some special giveaways that you, our incredible viewers / subscribers, are going to be eligible to win. Also, the seasons are changing, and we got merch that's on sale. So we got shirts, hoodies, stickers, coffee mugs, stationery, throw pillows, all kinds of wonderful things in store for you for this new season. Links are in our social media bios, so make sure you check out those links as well. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode of And I Quote. The episodes normally drop on Saturdays, 12 p.m. EST. Meeting of Fandom is on the first Friday of each month on that Friday of 7 p.m. EST. And then movie watch-alongs are the second, third, and fourth Fridays of every single month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you check out those videos. All these things can be located on our YouTube channel and our social media bios and on the respective playlists as well. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when our videos go up or they go live. And remember, life is better when supporting your favorite creators from all over the world and supporting those who support you. Take a look.
You've worked hard and written a great book. Now it's time to give it a great cover. If you're an indie author or small press publisher, Plasmafire Graphics is your source for affordable cover illustration and graphic design. Plasmafire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you.
Good morning. Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.